Hi, today's stories was a suggestion from, I believe, my first subscriber, and they are camping stories. What is scarier than being deep in the dark woods, far away from anyone else? Or perhaps someone, or something, is just out of sight, waiting to strike. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, subscribe and give a like. And let me know in the comments what kind of stories you want to hear next. If you have a story to send in, you can email me at swedishstoryteller@gmail.com. Now, come sit by the fire and listen, because now it's story time. Story number 1. So, I would consider camping my passion. It's the only hobby I have that I take so much interest in and get really excited to do. More specifically, camping alone. Of course I camp with friends every once in a while, but nothing really matches the experience of camping in the wild alone. There is something about sitting by a fire you made yourself until late and going to bed with nothing but the sounds of the wild to accompany you. Camping alone also means I experience some pretty scary shit. Usually it's animals, howls and cries from the woods that sends chills down your spine, or animals that take an interest in your tent. I've had bears sniff and bat at my tent, which is absolutely terrifying and usually keeps me up the rest of the night. I make sure I don't keep any food in my tent though, so no animals should ever really want to get into my tent. The scariest thing to encounter in the wild, however, is another person. You would think that animal and human footsteps sound relatively similar, but they don't. I've only had it happen twice until now. The first time it was just passing footsteps in the grass. They didn't do anything, but it still scared me shitless. The second time, someone stopped and waited for a while. They sounded about 20 feet from my tent. I was holding my breath until they just walked off again. However, about a month ago, I had my scariest camping experience. It was probably about 2 a.m. and I had been lying in my sleeping bag for about an hour, just listening to the sounds of the wild, when I heard footsteps approaching. I remember how they sounded as they brushed through the grass. They kept getting closer and closer, and at this point I was pretty freaked. It sounded like they were directly approaching my tent, and that they were. They stopped right in front of the entrance of my tent. I was trying my hardest to keep my breathing quiet. I always take a handgun with me when I go camping, just to stay safe from animals. That was the first thing to come to my mind when they stopped in front of my tent. I needed that gun. I, as quietly as I could, reached into my open backpack, feeling around softly through the clothing and such. Finally I found the gun and pulled it out carefully. I held it tightly, staring at my tent door. What happened next really made me panic. The person outside my tent started to unzip the tent door. It was slow, like they were trying to be quiet. At this point I was thinking, no more playing assumptions. You need to make sure you don't get murdered. So I flipped the safety of my gun. The person stopped unzipping my tent door after that click. I choked out the words, "Who is out there? I have a gun." After that, the person ran off faster than I have ever heard anyone run. I couldn't shut my eyes after that. I was shaking. I thought for sure I was either going to be killed or kill someone that night. I still go camping alone. The scariness is honestly the best part about it. You never know what you're going to encounter, Story number 2. This event happened to me and a group of friends in the summer of 2013 in Virginia. It's been a story I've told a lot of friends and classmates, but left out a very personal detail. This is the first time I'm sharing that detail. In high school, everyone was always looking for places to drink. That was the question every weekend practically. Where are we gonna drink tonight? Once we found a spot where we could drink freely, with limited chance of being arrested, we went there every weekend until we got bored. That sounds terrible, I know, but come on. We lived in an extremely boring, white, middle-class, gated community-ridden town. Drinking was a fun way to almost rebel against our parents and get away from the continuity of life there. So, my family and I moved here to Virginia from the Midwest. And we did a lot of outdoorsy things when we lived in the Midwest. And once the move to Virginia happened, my dad ended up getting really sick, which prevented him from being outside for long periods of time. Camping was always something my family and I used to do when I was little. And now, being a senior in high school, I remember how much beer my parents could drink without being disturbed. It was perfect. Get a bunch of buddies together, buy a few cases of beer, go out into the woods and camp for a weekend, and get plastered for my birthday. So we did our research and found a nice looking place about 40 minutes away. We packed the cars full with food and gear and of course, beer. When we went to the campsite, the place was packed with campers and tents. We could hardly find a spot. The only space that was open was site number 2, which was right by the registration office. Fuck, they will definitely be able to see us drinking. But we noticed that everyone in the office left like 5 PM and didn't come back until like 11 AM the next day. So we unpacked our stuff and camped for a weekend, and it was great. The weather was absolutely perfect. We never ran out of beer. We got to go swimming in the lake. We got sun. And we got away with it. So then, of course, we go back to our cookie-cutter neighborhood and tell all of our friends how great it was. And the only question we had left was, when are we gonna go next? So later that very same summer, we planned out another camping trip. This is where it got very strange. So we got like half of the original group to come again, as well as 2 very attractive girls who signed on to go with us. We were of course going back to the same place we went to last time when we had such a fun time. So we did a 40-minute drive back to the campground, and I noticed I felt different on the drive in. I attributed it to the cloudy covered sky, but something felt very different. We arrived at the campground together, and the first I noticed was that there were no one else there. No tents or campers anywhere, except for one. There was also nobody in the registration office, which I thought was strange for 3 PM on a Friday at the end of July. I just remember thinking, I should be weirded out by the fact there's nobody here right now. But nobody else seemed to be noticing, so it might just be me. But something is not right. It was like everybody else knew something that we didn't. The one other camper there didn't have anybody in it. We were there for 3 days straight, and we didn't see a single person come in or out of the camper the whole time. Nor did we see anything on their surroundings moved around. The whole weekend ended up being weird. The weather was rainy and humid, so we spent a lot of time in the tent just roasting and drinking beer. We were sitting in the tent when one of the girls says, "Is there someone walking on our site right now?" So I poke my head out of the tent, and there was a state ranger parked at our site looking at me, not 3 feet away from the tent opening. I immediately freaked out because we had been drinking in the tent, So I said, "Hi sir, how can I help you?" And all he said back was, "Don't forget to pay your camping fees." Then he stood there for like a minute, just staring at me. He gave me a small chuckle before backing up to his truck and getting in and driving away in the direction of the empty camper. I went back and told the story with relief because we got away with drinking, but something didn't feel right about that. But that's not a detail that comes into play that night. We were sitting around the campfire, drinking beer and telling funny stories. Earlier in the day, one of our friends, Mitch, went to get some more beer since we ran out. The only problem was he left at 3 PM and still wasn't back at 12 AM, so I was slightly freaking out. The culmination of all the weird things deterred me from drinking any beer that night, so I could stay clear-headed in case anything weird happened. Boy, am I glad I made that decision. So we're all sitting around the campfire telling stories, when I noticed a car drive up. Thinking it was Mitch, I jump up to see, but it's just a brown rusty looking truck, and it pulls into site number 1, which is a stone's throw away from us. It should have made me feel comfortable to know we're not alone out here in the woods, but it didn't. It made me paranoid, specifically for 2 reasons. Number 1, it's 12:30 AM. There was no reason he should be here at this time if he was just going camping. Number 2, he didn't have any tent or camping equipment in the back. All he had was a blue tarp covering half a full bed. So I stayed aware, but calm, as to not freak out my group of friends. But I noticed him setting up a floodlight and a wooden bench. But that's all I could see because he parked his truck on the far side of the campsite to block view from us. I talked myself down, saying, "Just calm down, you're being paranoid. It's probably just something you don't want to get involved with." So I turned my full focus to my friends and even started drinking some beer. About an hour later, I made my worries about Mitch known to everyone and they all calmed me down. But as I was agreeing with them, I looked up and saw a man walking onto our site, but I only caught him in the light of the campfire, so he was on top of us before I could even react. The man said, in a thick Eastern European accent, "Hello, I am the park ranger for this park, and I just wanted to offer you 2 complimentary pieces of wood for your fire. You know you are not allowed to bring your own wood here, because it can have bugs on it. Enjoy and have a good night." We waited until he was out of earshot before giving it. What the fucking hell was that? We're outside. Don't bugs live out here? Why would it matter? But I noticed when he put the wood down next to our fire, there was a part of him that didn't bend when he did. Once he was walking away, I saw it swinging from his belt loop. I know he was carrying a large machete. Mitch still wasn't back at 2 AM, and I was afraid for his life. So I asked my close friend Mop to ride with me to go find him. It was a 1-road drive, so he had to be on it no matter what. I was also going to voice my terrors and concerns with him in the car to see if he felt the same things I did. We were driving down the road, looking for either a crashed car or Mitch heading in the opposite direction. As soon as I opened my mouth to ask if Mop was freaking out too, we saw Mitch speed past us, which was a huge relief to me. I whipped a quick U-turn and started following him back to the site. Once we were all back, we told Mitch the story about the strange wood guy and how we thought he had died. But he had brought the beer, and we all started drinking once he was back. I began to notice a pounding sound coming from site number 1. That sounded a lot like he was chopping wood. Yeah, that makes sense. He's the park ranger. and he's chopping wood for them to sell, and he gave us 2 complimentary pieces. That makes sense. Until we ran out of wood, and they asked me to go steal some more. Nothing made sense about that. We brought bundles of wood, enough to last us this night, and it was gone. So I guess I had to go steal some wood. Now the wood tower was in between site number 1 and site number 2, but it was closer to site number 1. I snuck from our campsite, through the woods and towards the wood tower. I was drunk at this point and was not scared of the mysterious woodchopper. So I get to the wood tower and begin sliding pieces of wood into my arms. The more I get, the less times I have to come back and steal more. So I grab about 8 big pieces and start sneaking back, but not before throwing a glance in the direction of site number 1, where the chopping sound continued. My eyes focus on the wooden bench, where I saw the park ranger chopping with his machete, a human leg. I saw him plummet the large knife in the thigh and cut it in about halfway, before he raised it again and slammed it back into the same spot, severing it from the rest of the leg. I closed my eyes and froze. I immediately started tearing up and felt like I was going to puke. It felt like I was standing there for hours, there in the dark, with my arms shaking from holding the heavy wood and my eyes watering from the trauma that unfolded in front of me. I pulled my legs out of their frozen state and slunk back to our site. I dropped the wood down and just sat down. I didn't know what to do. I could have said something, and we could have gone home and gotten in trouble, but I would have known everyone would be okay. Or I could just keep quiet and not freak everyone out. When I got back, the jokes about the wood guy were spewing out and everyone was laughing, but it was as someone had turned my hearing aid down and I was just listening to cotton. I told myself it wasn't a leg. It was a log. It had to be a log. This doesn't happen to people like you. It's a log. So after some time, we burned up the 8 logs I brought back, and I just went into the tent and laid in bed. Everyone followed. It's a log, remember? It was just a log. I woke up the next day to a beautiful hot summer day. I looked over, and all my friends were alive and well, sleeping and waking up next to me. That was one of the best feelings I've had, knowing that the night of worrying was nothing. But I couldn't help but remember an extremely realistic dream about the wood guy peering into our tent from the screen window on the side. I made eye contact with him and shook my head. No. And he slowly walked away. But you know, just a dream, I guess.